Do you find yourself repeating the same relationships over and over and over? The people might change, but the pattern itself feels oddly similar? If so, I'm guessing you're sick and tired of it and ready for something different. In today's video, I'll be giving you a 4-step framework to fundamentally change what you do in your relationships. Because when you change what you do, then your relationships will change too. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Trevor Brown. I'm a licensed therapist. I work with expats and global nomads to cultivate emotional resilience and foster deeper connections in their lives. If that sounds like you, something you're interested in, go below, schedule a free consultation. Let's quickly explore why it is that we might end up recreating the same relationship with different people over and over and over. Because the people that we're dating, maybe the people that we marry, well, they might change, and yet the relationship itself feels oddly similar. And it feels oddly similar because it is similar, because it is familiar. It's familiar territory. See, doing what we've always done is familiar and comfortable. Yes, it may come with a price tag that stings a little bit. It might end with us feeling annoyed and frustrated and in some sort of pain, but it's pain we know. It's that whole adage, the devil we know versus the devil we don't. Most of us are going to choose, albeit in a sort of unconscious manner, the devil that we know. So yes, it comes with a price tag. You're sick of it. You're sick of paying the price tag, but it is comfortable. And so if you're going to change, and I'm going to teach you how to do that in this video, you're going to have to be willing and ready to feel uncomfortable. Okay, are you still with me? Awesome. So here you are watching this video. And what that means to me is that you are genuinely ready to get off of your old, habitual, outdated autopilot settings and create a new kind of relationship. The relationship that you've always dreamed of. One that nourishes you instead of frustrates you. One that feels good and makes you feel good. And maybe most importantly, one that lasts. And the way you get that type of relationship is you create it. And the way you create it is you do things differently than you have ever done them before. Which means that the first thing we need to get clear on here is how you have done things in the past. How do you typically show up in your relationships? What are your normal and habitual tendencies and behaviors? That, my friends, is the first stage of our 4-step journey. To answer this question, I'm going to give you a very specific framework. It is called the Relational Life Grid. It was created by Terry Real in the Relational Life Institute. So I'm going to give you a pretty brief nuts and bolts overview of this grid. And as I explain it, I want you to locate yourself on it, which I'll get to in just a moment. But first, let's start off with the 2 axes. So there's the horizontal axis and there's the vertical axis. The horizontal axis is about boundaries. On one extreme, we have being walled off, which is being too boundaried, too much boundary. And on the other side, we have boundaryless, which obviously is too little boundary. If I'm walled off, it means I'm inaccessible. There's no reaching me. There's no contacting me. I could be sitting right in front of you, and yet you feel like I'm not even there. And no matter what efforts you make, there's no pulling me out of myself. Another word for that is stonewalling. On the boundaryless side, all of my stuff sort of just spills out of me. It just leaks out of me. And everything that happens out here just sort of comes into me. It just impacts me. There's no sense of separateness really between me and you. When I'm in a boundaryless position, my well-being is very much contingent on your well-being. I need you to be okay in order for me to be okay. If you're having a bad day, it's going to be literally impossible for me to be happy if I'm boundaryless. And then we have the vertical axis, which is about self-esteem. So up here we have too much self-esteem. That's also known as grandiosity or one-up. Down here, we have too little self-esteem. That's also known as shame or one down. In the middle, of course, we have healthy self-esteem. So grandiosity means that I sort of feel like I am God's gift to earth. I am better than you, and everybody else. I'm the most important person on the planet, and there's no doubting that. Shame, one downness, means that I doubt my own worthiness. I doubt my inherent self-worth. I'm prone to feelings of inadequacy. I locate myself below other people. I put myself below my partner. And like I said, we call this the one down position. Now, when we slap the vertical axis onto the horizontal axis, we have a grid with 4 quadrants. And so what you're going to do now is locate yourself in one of these 4 quadrants. So I'm going to explain them to you briefly, and as I do, think about where you see yourself most clearly. And to do that, ask yourself this question. Which of these 4 quadrants do I end up in my current relationship or my most recent relationship when I am triggered, when I am in a state of emotional distress? So don't be thinking about yourself on the good days. Think about yourself on the bad days, the bad, stressful, painful, anxiety-ridden moments in relationship, and think about, look for where you go. So we'll go through these in a circle. Let's start on the lower part of the grid, and let's start in the boundaryless territory. So we're gonna start in boundaryless and one down. Boundaryless and one down territory. There's a sort of frantic energy here. There's a desperate energy here. Because I need you to be okay in order for me to be okay. I need you to be happy in order for me to feel happy. And so there's this desperation of trying to get the other person to approve of me and to be happy themselves so that I can feel okay internally. And so this actually slides into control, and behaviors end up looking sort of like controlling behaviors with a desperate, frantic energy to them. Now, if we move up, then we're in the boundaryless side still, but we're in the one up territory. And this, there's an anger that's here, like a self-righteous anger, a self-righteous indignation. There's this expectation that you will do what I want you to do for me. And if you don't, then I will let you know in no uncertain terms how disappointed in you I am or how angry at you I am. And so my behaviors can actually end up looking quite mean, insulting, name-calling, shaming, sort of general mistreatment of my partner. Now, if we slide on the horizontal axis, we're gonna go over into the walled off territory. So now we're in one up and walled off. And the energy in one up, walled off territory is superiority, a sort of holier than thou type of vibe. I'm looking down my nose at my partner and the rest of the world. It's sort of like you take care of yourself over there, okay? I got me. I'm okay. Yeah, I'm good. I don't need you, actually. The behaviors here can end up looking sort of calloused, cold, mean, condescending, rude, quite frequently. And now, the 4th quadrant, which is the one down, walled off side. And the energy here is actually a sort of depression. It's like a general malaise. It's apathy, apathetic. It's like a hopelessness. Think of Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. It's like, this is it. This is my lot in life. This is me. This is my relationship. That's my partner. There's nothing I can do. No changing it. Oh well. Just a passive, hopeless resignation. So that's the one down, boundaryless side. Hopelessness, a give up sort of attitude. And so again, what you're gonna do here is locate yourself with precision in one of those 4 categories. You might think to yourself, I do it all. Okay, fair, maybe you do. But think, where do you go most reliably in moments of stress? In moments when you're triggered in your current or most recent intimate relationship, which of these quadrants do you end up sliding into? Which do you end up acting out? But really, I do want you to get as clear as you can, because when you locate yourself precisely here, it's gonna give you a lot of information about yourself that is going to be invaluable in changing what it is that you habitually do in relationship so that you can end up creating a new and improved type of relationship for yourself. Okay, so at this point you've located yourself in one of those 4 quadrants in moments of trigger. And now we're gonna move into step number 2, which I am going to call resisting the urge. So now that you've identified where you habitually go and what you habitually do, the idea, obvious enough probably, is to not go there. So it's to see yourself going there. That's why the identification part is so important. Because when we begin to know what we do, then we can see us sliding into it, and then we actually stand a chance at not going there. We stand a chance at resisting the impulse, at resisting the urge. Is it easy? Most definitively, no. Is it possible? Yes. Can anybody else do it for you? No. Can you learn to do it yourself in time? Yes, if you really want to, if you're dedicated, if you're devoted, if you're ready to practice with discipline, then unequivocally, yes, you can. So the point is, you get triggered, you see yourself on the cusp of going into one of those 4 quadrants, you catch yourself before you end up behaving out of them, you resist the urge, you take a breath, and you bring yourself back down into what we are going to call neutral, which we can think of actually as the center of that grid. Now, after you resist the urge, and this is especially true for beginners, you're gonna need some space. If you just resist the urge in the heat of the moment for 1 second, probably the next second you're not gonna be able to. So after you resist the impulse to behave from out of one of those 4 quadrants, you're gonna need to find a way to take some space from the activating circumstances, from the conversation, from your partner. So that might sound like, I need to take 5 minutes for myself just to take some breaths, just to regulate. I'll be right back at the end of 5 minutes, I promise. Just gonna take care of myself. See you soon. I know that it's easy for me to say that when I'm not triggered. It's hard to say that when we are triggered, but hard does not mean impossible. So the point is, you're gonna resist the urge and you're gonna take some space. And now we're gonna go into step number 3, which is, okay, now I have this space, now what the heck do I do with it? Well, the goal in this moment of space is to bring yourself back to neutral. It's to get yourself out of one of those 4 quadrants and into the center of the grid, into relational health, healthy self-esteem, not too boundaryless and not too walled off. And to do that, you're gonna have to deal with your trigger. What I mean by that is that your behavior is a result of your trigger. And your trigger is a result of the underlying vulnerability or painful feelings that have been activated. So if you can attend to the underlying vulnerability, then you won't be triggered, and then you will be able to choose your behavior and change your relationship. So there are many ways of working with our emotional sensitivity and with our vulnerabilities and of bringing ourselves back into that state of neutrality. Today, I'm gonna offer you 2 experiments, 2 ways of working with this. And what I would suggest you doing is to choose the one that resonates with you, the one that appeals to you, and commit to practicing it for a little bit, probably a couple of weeks actually. Make some discipline around this, put it in the front of your mind, and see what happens, and then change the experiment as you see fit. This isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. These are 2 experiments that I have found useful, and you might be able to tinker with them a little bit to make them more relevant for yourself. So experiment number 1. You are going to attend to the vulnerability or the difficult feelings that lie beneath your trigger. See, here's the idea with triggers. The reason you're triggered is that you're feeling something you don't want to feel. A particular sensitivity of yours has been touched. The triggered behavior that you normally engage in, one of those 4 quadrants, but that you resisted this time, is your typical best effort to escape the vulnerability or the difficult feeling. But now, in this space that you've created for yourself, what we're going to do is turn towards the difficult feeling. You're going to actually practice welcoming the vulnerability that's already there. Now, some people struggle with this because they're like, well, what is the difficult feeling underneath my trigger? I'm not quite sure. Maybe it's fear, maybe it's sadness, maybe it's anger or disappointment or something like that. It can be hard to know. You either know immediately or you're not entirely sure. If you're not entirely sure, that's fine. What I encourage you to do is to skip the feeling. Like, don't try to name the feeling, and instead just go into the sensation level experience that you're having. the vulnerable experience that you're having. It might feel like a heavy chest or like a queasy, nauseous stomach or like tight shoulders. But just go into that and think of that as the vulnerability or as the difficult feeling that you don't want to feel. And so what you're gonna do is you're gonna hang out in the space you've created. You're gonna hang out with those vulnerabilities of yours, with those difficult feelings of yours for a little bit. You're just gonna sit with them with an attitude of welcoming them for 10 or 30 seconds, maybe a couple of minutes. So ask yourself this: I wonder what feelings, vulnerabilities, or difficult sensations I'm having just beneath the trigger that I wish I wasn't experiencing. And in this moment, what would it be like to just be with them, to attend to them, to hang out with them for a short period of time? So that's the first practice. Invite yourself to turn towards and spend some time with the painful, vulnerable, difficult feeling that is already there. And the second practice, it's sort of similar, but we get there in a different way. And it's to see that vulnerable feeling or that difficult feeling as your inner child, as your wounded child. Not as you per se, but as the wounded child that you carry with you from your childhood and that from time to time gets activated. And what you're gonna do here is practice providing comfort and love and support to that wounded child part of you in the exact same way that you would to a real child who is undergoing a painful experience. So you're moving towards the vulnerability. So you move towards the wounded child part of you, and you move towards that part of you from what we call your adult mind or your wise mind, and you just offer reassurance. You offer comfort. You offer your warm, loving, non-judging presence. It's that attitude that's like, hey, I'm here for you. I got you. You're okay. You don't need to change. I know you're in pain. I'll be with you for as long as you're in it. You're safe with me. In relational life therapy, and this is an RLT or relational life therapy practice, to give credit where credit is due, we call this attending to your inner children and reparenting yourself, actually. So again, hang out with this young, vulnerable, scared, painful part of you for a couple of minutes, and that's gonna change your internal feeling state in a pretty radical way. And it's gonna create the setting for you to be able to return to your partner. Now with both of these practices, what you're doing is you are self-soothing. You are attending to your vulnerability. And when you do this, one of two things happens. One, you feel better. Your vulnerability softens. Your difficult feelings sort of dissolve because as they're attended to and seen and held, they don't need to be so loud because they're heard now. They're having the experience of being heard. And so quite frequently, they sort of melt away. They just pass through you. And so they're not there anymore. And the second thing, and this is really, really interesting and important, is that you're showing yourself in real time that you actually don't need these vulnerabilities and difficult feelings to dissolve. It's nice if they do, and a lot of the time they do, but even if they don't, you're showing yourself, whoa, like I can actually live with these. I can live with my wounded child being activated from time to time. To put it shortly, therefore, I don't need to go into one of these 4 quadrants, even if I am feeling something I don't want to feel. So I'm developing confidence in my own ability to feel difficult stuff and stay in neutral and stay present and engage with myself and with my partner and not go into one of the 4 quadrant behaviors. So my friends, congratulations. You have done the hardest work and you are now entering step number 4. You've gotten yourself back to neutral, or at the very least, you've taught yourself that you don't need to respond out of the triggered place because you are willing to feel the difficult feelings. And so now you get to think about how you'd really like to behave, how you'd really like to show up. You get to choose in a very real and deliberate place your response instead of just automatically acting it out, which is what we do when we're operating out of one of the 4 quadrants. And so the behavior that you ultimately choose, the way you ultimately decide to show up with your partner in the relationship can really be based on a set of goals that aren't just unconscious, I don't like how I'm feeling, get me out of here, but goals that instead can come from really meaningful and deliberate questions, such as, how and who would I like to really be in this relationship? And what can I do right now that is most in alignment with that vision that I have for myself? What kind of relationship would I really like to have? And what can I do right now to really help create it and help foster it and help strengthen that type of relationship? How can I show my partner love right now, even if we're having a little bit of a disagreement? How can I show up in a way that makes my partner feel seen, heard, and cared for? These aren't novel questions, of course. But the thing is that when we're triggered, we don't consider these questions. So when we get ourselves out of that triggered place, then we can really engage in our relationships from a position that allows us to show up in a way that supports those questions, to show up in a way that is in alignment with who and how we want to be and the type of relationship that we want to create and foster. The point is, when we're no longer just responding from that triggered place where the only goal is get me out of this and make me feel better, we'll find that a whole range of behavioral choices and options open up to us. And that, my friends, is what has the potential to fundamentally rewrite your relationship script. When you do something totally different, the odds that something totally different happens in your relationship go up astronomically. You will have changed your historical stance, so the relationship dance that you're in is going to change as well. Now, here is a caveat, and it's an important one. You cannot control your partner's response. You can't control their behavior, which means effectively that you can't control for the outcome of your new behavior. So you're showing up in a radically new way. But what ultimately happens with that, well, that's to be determined, because it takes two to tango and we don't exactly know how this other person will show up. But that's okay. Odds are they will show up differently. And even if they don't, then you can feel good about how you have shown up. You can feel very good about what you did. You have done something new and something different. And that, repeated over time, this is not a one and done, obviously, but repeated over time is what will get you out of the old and repetitive relationships that you are done with, that you're sick of, that you don't deserve anymore, and that you are, once and for all, leaving behind. Okay, so that is all for today. At this point, you should have a pretty decent idea of what you normally do when you're triggered. Go into one of the 4 places. Why you normally do it, because it's comfortable, it's familiar, and it's because you're trying to get yourself untriggered, albeit in unskillful ways. And finally, you know how to change things up. You know how to change what you do, how to change your habitual stance in the hopes of changing the relational dance. As always, I would really appreciate your comments and your likes on this video. They help me grow the channel and they make me feel good. And please go ahead and subscribe if you haven't. Share it with other people who could use it. The more you subscribe, the more this video gets put in front of people who might also benefit from it. Thank you very much for your time. I hope this was useful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Cheers.